creator is a writer. And I mentioned this in the video that I had with Paul, and we talked about your writing and how vivid your descriptions are.
Oh, nice.
We talked about your writing when you were at the courthouse, and there was an old guy who came in on a cane and whatever. Like, it was so vivid, you could actually feel yourself in the room. Why aren't you writing?
I write when I'm sad. The most vivid things I have written, like the things that I have written really well, I am sad and depressed. I've tried to write later on when I'm not, and I don't necessarily have the same conviction that I have when I'm like totally in a completely happy space. I also really write some really good stuff. There's a series on my WordPress account. I was writing about this relationship with a girl, and it got me into trouble a lot. But lots of people read it and were like, hey, and it was like a series. Guys were like, yo, man, who's this chick? And I'm like, it's no one.
Yeah,
it's
fiction,
just
almost,
fiction.
yeah.
When I came back from climbing Renzori, I wrote about my love relationship with the mountain. So it was like me and the mountain, me as a guy and the mountain as a chick, and my struggles to get from one level to another. And I never finished it because then I had to get back into work. We had spent like a whole week away from work, and then work just piled up and I never ever got to finish it. But there are like 3 or 4 stages of the climb. Those are also on WordPress and you can be able to see them there. I've not gotten to a place where I can just write when I'm not in an emotional state. I have to like psych myself up to write. And there are days when no matter how much you try, you're like, oi.
What will happen with me is I will have an amazing idea that I'm so excited about. I will write chapter 1 and I'm like, oh, this is great.
Yeah.
What comes next? Where do I take this story?
Another thing that I find, there are times like I'm driving and then I have a really great idea on which to build. I'm sure I know where to. But then when I get home, there's so much activity at home that I totally forget about it. Then when I try to write it out, it's not as vivid as it was when I was driving home. The last writing I did was about a boda being sold, but I wrote it from the boda's perspective.
How interesting.
And the reason why I wrote it was a guy came here and he sold his boda. But he left the boda here for someone to take it to somewhere else. So I was like, like the waiting of the morning just before you're going, the anticipation of doing everything in the day and stuff like that. And then you realize that you're actually sold and you have a new owner.
So you're going to share that story with us?
It's on my WordPress
It's
account.
on your WordPress account?
Yeah.
Okay.
One of the things that I want to do first
Yes.
is to write a children's story. Petra loves reading, but then she wants to see the pictures. I would like to be able to have a book that both Petra and Finley can enjoy. Because he's 5 and she's 8. If there was a book that both 5 and 8-year-olds could read and enjoy, that's the kind of book that I would like to write for at least the Ugandan. But then, of course, yes, I would like to write a whole story, a complete story. There's always been a passion of mine to write a fictitious story about a Ugandan superhero. No, you're always like, what would a Ugandan superhero be? What, like data enough to fight the VPN? Because I feel like as much as we have had all these superheroes, there are people that don't have such a perspective in which to be like, oh, it's a really nice movie. Like me and a friend of mine went to watch Deadpool and we laughed through the whole of Deadpool. 2 ladies seated behind us were like, this is the worst movie we have ever been in.
Really?
And for us were just like, no. At one point I had wanted him to have the power of speed, but the power of speed is Flash. What if he could teleport himself from one place to another? That then moves into like X-Men-ish kind of thing. You notice that Flash passed by in Uganda. We have so much dust. So if Flash passed, we'll be like, yo. That makes the story more interesting, at least for me. I really had wanted to kill the superhero at the end of my story.
Really? Well, I am looking forward to it. If you need to have a conversation, text me, we shall.
I'm glad I'm part of this video. I go back and watch all the other videos about how to write and how to prepare yourself. I'm grateful that you've been able to help people a lot.
Do you have any questions for me?
Yeah, I have questions for you. How do you get to a point where you can write like a whole book? I failed to write 2 chapters. I can write like one really long chapter, but then it's like I have written the whole story.
It's done.
It's done. How do you get to do that?
It happened 2 different ways. The first way, I wrote the story about Chumbusho. I called him Chumbusho.
Yeah.
I had determined that I wanted to tell an African story of fantasy. At that time, there were so many stories about vampires and werewolves, but those are not African monsters. So I wanted wanted to imagine what could it possibly be. So it was more of an exploration. And it rambled. It was very, very disorganized.
Oh.
But the second book I wrote with Baden. The way that it's structured is very, very different. I wrote first 4 chapters. She loved the first one and hated 3. Okay. Let's sit down and discuss what happens in chapter 2. We have a conversation. I ask questions.
Yeah.
And Baden answers them. And we treated each chapter like it was its own story. So it has a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Yes.
Like something complete happens in the chapter.
Even if I'm writing my own book, I can get like guys to help me write a book that has an idea that I birthed.
Of course, you'll have to have discussions about credit. If anyone was to pick up your book and turn it into a movie, because here's an African superhero birthed by an African, and you get a ton of money, how much it is you give the people you're crediting.
Question 2. How did you get into liking more African stories than all the other stories told out there? Because you're more now into African stories, writing African stories. How did you get there? Why did you get there?
I think that the market in Canada is saturated with certain kinds of stories. There are other stories that have not been told, and especially having grown up here, I know that life is not what is imagined when people call our countries shithole countries. But having grown up here and knowing what here is like those stories are not being told. And even when they are, like I went to the Uganda book market yesterday and picked up some books. You can't find them anywhere. They're not on Amazon. Like the access is weird. You have to be sort of on the ground in order to get some of these books. So out there's one story. Africans, you can imagine. From North Africa to West Africa, East, South, it's one story.
The last question is, if you had one thing to do differently to become a good writer, what would that have been?
Share my writing. Have other people read it so that I know. It would have made a great difference if I had shared that I was writing and shared my writing with other people, my fiction writing. I have shared my writing with some people. I tried to join some critique partner groups. You submit a chapter that you've written and then they'll come and critique your work. There was this guy who was very, very rude and he didn't have like anything constructive to say. His first thing was that your story is boring. Okay, so what makes it boring? You lose focus on that particular story because you're like, my story is boring and I don't understand why. Does it need correcting? Like, am I wrong? And then how many critique partners do you have to have in order to be confident that your story can go on just the way it is? Share it early.
But in terms of criticism, does it help or does it break?
This is also the other thing. That is the formula over there.
Yes. It might not be
the same thing over here. Thank you so much for letting me talk to you.
You're welcome.
And I hope that we will have more opportunities to speak to each other about the things we're interested in.
Yes.
And thank you so much for sharing your passion. All of Peter's social media will be in the description box below. Go and follow him. I hope that you've gotten some things from it. I heard some things that are very interesting that are happening in Uganda. I've been saying this already.
Come to Uganda if you've never been in Uganda.
It's so beautiful.
We have scenery.
If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and let me know that you have enjoyed the conversations with my brother. Don't forget to share and comment if you have something to say. If you have any questions, Peter will check the comments. We'll answer any questions that you have. And if you have not yet subscribed, there is a subscribe button. It is below Peter. Go ahead and click that button. Don't forget to click the little bell icon so that whenever I upload a video, you get a notification.
Yeah, that one I like.
As always, thank you so much for being here with us. Have a wonderful night. Have a wonderful the rest of your day. Have a wonderful week. And I will see you next time.
Yes, and try as much as possible to interact with us at social media pages. Promise I will answer as many questions as they come. Subscribe!
Yes.